Today we're looking at notes over is it a function? So first thing I want you to write out is the definition for a relation. A relation is a set of ordered pairs or data, and it can be represented in 4 different ways. The first way is ordered pairs, which we just talked about. The second way we represent relations is a table. And third, we have mappings. And last but not least, sometimes we use a graph. Alright, so sometimes a relation, a special relation, qualifies to be called a function. So a function is a relation in which none of the x values repeat. So every x value has a different y value. And basically what that means is it passes the vertical line test. That's something we're going to talk about here shortly. Alright, let's look at some examples. Let's first look at that first kind of representation. Let's look at some ordered pairs. So look at this first set of ordered pairs. Write it down. I want you to remember that when you have an ordered pair, the first number is the x value, the second number is the y value. So here, remember, in order for a relation to qualify as a function, none of the x values repeat. So let's look at the x values here. We've got 0, 2, 3, and 4. So none of the x values repeat. So then that means yes, it is a function because none of the x values repeat. Alright, let's look at this next set of ordered pairs. On this next set of ordered pairs, we've got -3, 2, 0, and 6. So again, yes, we can call this a function because none of the x values repeat. Oops. Alright, let's look at this third set of ordered pairs. We've got x values of 4, 0, 4, and 2. Alright, a red light should be going off in your head because I said 4 for an x value twice. 4 goes with 10 and 4 goes with 5. That is not allowed when we're talking about a function. A function cannot have any x values that repeat. So no, this is not a function. 4 repeats. The x value of 4 repeats. Alright, let's look at the next representation. Now we have tables. So let's look at some tables. Alright, we've got 3 sets of tables here if you want to pause and jot it down real quick. Look at this first set of tables. First set of table, we've got -3, 2, 4, and -7 for my x values. You'll notice again, none of those numbers are repeating for x, so yes, it's a function. Alright, no repeating x values. Look at this table. In this table, we've got -3, 4, -3, and 6. Again, a red light should be going off in your head. I said -3 for x twice. So no, that's not a function. -3 repeats. Alright, last but not least, this table here, we've got -4, 0.5 or a half, 0.75 or 3/4, and -7. None of those x values are the same, so yes, it is a function. Alright, let's move on to the next representation. Pause if you need to jot this stuff down. Mappings. So first mapping. if you're not familiar with mappings, here it kind of gives a description. These are your x values, these are your y values. You can almost read them like a coordinate. This is the coordinate 1, 8. This is the coordinate 2, 10. And this is the coordinate 3, 18. So you'll notice each of these values here on the left, each of the x values only have one arrow pointing. It's not like it's being used twice. There's not two arrows coming away from it. So yes, it's a function. None of the x values repeat. Let's move on to this next mapping. This next mapping isn't quite as nice. It doesn't go in straight lines. 1 goes with 7, 2 goes with 9, and 3 goes with 7. But none of my x values repeated. My y value got used twice, but that wasn't the stipulation. The stipulation was no x value repeats, and that is correct here. None of my x values are repeating. So yes, it is a function. Let's look at this last. If you notice on this last mapping, the difference between the last one and the first two is that this x value here of 1 has 2 arrows coming off of it. It's got an arrow pointing at 6 and an arrow pointing at 7. That means the coordinate 1, 6 is part of this relation, and the coordinate 1, 7 is used for this relation. That means if there's 2 arrows coming off it, one is being repeated, one is being used twice. So that is against the rules. No, 1 repeats. So this cannot be a function because 1 repeats. Alright, and last but not least, I couldn't fit it on this page. Let's talk about graphs. Okay, so at the top of the page for graphs, I want you to write the vertical line test is if a vertical line, remember vertical means up and down, so like your pencil right now, a vertical line passes through more than one point on a graph of a relation, the relation is not a function. So let's look at these graphs and put those words to use. So if you drug a vertical line across this graph, if it were thinner, of course, does a vertical line touch any 2 points at one time? Or you could test it by drawing a bunch of vertical lines on this graph. Look at all of those vertical lines. Does any of these single vertical lines touch through more than 1 point at a time? The answer here is no. I don't have a vertical line that's touching 2 points at one given time. So that means if 2 points don't touch at one time any vertical line, then yes, it is a function. None of the x values repeat. Let's, however, come over here to this graph and notice as I draw vertical lines, those vertical lines are good. It's just touching through 1 point. That vertical line is just touching through 1 point. That vertical line is just touching 1 point. That vertical line is just touching 1 point. Ding, 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 ding. This vertical line right here is touching 2 points. That is not allowed. A vertical line is not allowed to touch 2 points at one time. That means no, it's not a function because of the vertical line test. Vertical line test doesn't pass. My one vertical line touched 2 points at one time. Let's come down and look at some more continuous data. So let's look at this line right here. This is my x-axis, this is my y-axis. Let's look at this line going through. If I draw a bunch of vertical lines on this graph, do any of those vertical lines touch this graph at more than one place? The answer is no. And so I know this sounds weird, but yes, it is a function because of that reason. And opposite here, if I draw a vertical line on this figure, this rectangle figure on the coordinate grid, look, that vertical line touches this graph 2 places at one time, and that is not allowed. No, it's not a function because of the vertical line test. Let's look at this next graph. If I were to draw a bunch of vertical lines, none of those vertical lines touch this graph at more than one place. So yes, it is a function. Looking at this last figure here, we have a circle. Drawing a vertical line any place on this circle, and it passes through 2 points. So that means no, it's not a function because of the vertical line test. Please rewind, copy anything that you weren't able to get because it went too fast, or rewatch anything that didn't make sense, and have a great night.